All right. Hope everybody is having a fantastic day so far. Welcome back to the Industry Innovators podcast. As always, I'm your host, Grant Lira, and I could not be more excited to share our guests with you guys today. If you follow me, if you're in this space, you probably already know who this man is. For those of you who don't, let me introduce you to Chris Doe. For those of you who don't know who Chris is, you can call him the man that makes sales sexy. You can call him probably one of the world's best question askers. And hopefully by the end of this podcast, you'll know him well enough to call him your friend. So without further ado, Chris, what's going on, brother?
I love that intro, Grant. I've not been introduced that way. The world's best question asker. I like that. I'm proud
Well,
of that.
and it's something where I'm going to be speaking from a lot of experience of just consuming your content because I have been watching it for a long time and I find it super valuable. But one of the biggest things that I always see and where I always get the most value is listening to how you ask questions because people know that that's so much of sales is just asking questions so you know where to guide the conversation, you know if it's even a good fit for people. But I mean, seriously, I do believe you might be one of the world's best question askers.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I try to teach people this because I think when we're young, we think answers are the best tools of our trade and we volunteer answers, we make assumptions. And if we just sit back a little bit, ask the right opening question, and the rest of it will reveal itself. So I'm trying to get more people to pay attention to that. I'm glad to hear that you are at least. So I can
For
count
sure.
one person for sure.
Well, I hope there's more than one, and obviously if people are listening to you, I think they're also seeing that because if you look at like some sales training out there right now, you can definitely see that there's a lot of people, and I won't name names, but there's definitely people who go into the more persuasive, almost borderline manipulative side of things. And like you said, they're presenting solutions before they even really know what the full situation is. And the thing that I always like about you, like for instance, listening to the live podcasts you do where you bring people on stage and you do these role plays with them, it's like extremely cool to hear how all these people from different industries come and they do this role play with you. And you basically get like a very, very high level overview. And then you go into that. And because you can ask such good questions, you're this chameleon who's talking about being a violin player for hire at a wedding and then also a graphic designer over here. And I think the point I'm trying to get to is it's less about, oh, I know this tactic and I know how to overcome this objection. And it's more about just listening to the people. And like, do you have a structure of how you go about these questions or how you like I guess, like, I don't wanna lead you into any answer, but I'm just curious if you have any insight on, like, question asking or anything you wish you told yourself sooner.
Mm. I do want to point out something in case somebody has listened to one of those conversations before. First of all, I believe sales is having a conversation, so you have to be a good conversationalist. A key ingredient to that is active listening. So I'm really paying attention to what they're saying, and they're dropping clues all the time about their life, their pain points, their wins, their challenges, their worldview, their beliefs, their interests. And so those are openings for you to find a really big problem. Now, I do want to say this as a host and I'm talking to someone, their guard is down. And if you think about it in real life, when we're walking into a sales situation, their guard is opposite, it's up. They're skeptical, they're cynical, they know that you're going to sell them something. So your job is to try to build rapport with them. And the best way I know how to do that is to engage in conversation. So the advantage I have there, and there's two strategies, which is if we're talking about a third thing and I'm going to drop into a sales mode stealth like, they don't even know a sales is happening. So I'm just listening for like, what does this person want? And then I could just ask them a few questions. And then before they know it, a sales is kind of, they're in the middle of a sales dialogue. Now, it's a little bit more challenging when you're talking to someone and you know they have something you want and you have something that they want. And it's going to feel transactional in the very beginning. So I want to shift my mindset from looking for the transaction and looking for the transformation. This is a critical switch here. So I'm listening and I'm asking a question about what is important to this person that would make their life easier, better, more productive, more rewarding? And why haven't they been able to get that before? This is the critical part. So once you pick up on that, and then I'm like a shark in water with blood. I smell it, I see it. I want to ask lots and lots of questions there, and I disregard my need for a sale. I disregard my own personal expertise and things that I offer to the world, and I just want to find the problem. And then I want to connect the problem to the pain point and what that looks like if they're successful. This opens the door now. We're on the same page. We're looking at the same problem.
That's amazing. And it takes that approach of like you're sitting next to them as opposed to across. It's not like,
Right.
hey, you came to me for X thing. I'm going to tell you why I'm the best at this and why you need me. It's okay. Why do you actually need this? What are the problems this is going to solve? And it's just a completely different like teamwork dynamic there. And I love how you do that, and I think you do it really elegantly, and I don't know that I've heard anybody explain it the way that you do before. So I'm super grateful for that response because 'cause I've always wanted to kinda pick your brain a little bit on that. Um, Within that too, I think that, like, so many people view selling as forcing somebody to buy, persuading somebody to buy, creating a need when maybe there isn't any at all. I've always viewed selling as solutions. Just like you said, you need to be able to provide that solution, and then it's not even really selling, you're helping people. And that's a much, much better long term relationship to have. So, with that said, this is something I've always been curious about with you as well. Is I understand you are a first generation immigrant from Vietnam. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's incredible, first of all. I'm just really interested in this part of it. Coming from Vietnam into an entirely new place, new culture, new everything, I just know that there was such a curve of when you first got here to becoming to becoming the future, becoming, having these other companies we'll talk about in a little bit. But tell me about that experience of like what that looked like to come somewhere completely new and then have all this success. Because I know it didn't happen overnight.
No, no, it took a really, really long time, like decades long. So I just want to set the timeline here. I'm
Mhm.
3 years old when I come to the United States. It's 1975, the fall of Saigon, and I'm here with my parents. And the first struggle for me is language and understanding culture. And I didn't know of a place before coming to America because I'm 3 years old. I'm like, I have zero memory of what it was like to live in Vietnam. And I had strange perceptions that we lived in villages or something like that, like with no running water. My dad's like, no, we live in the city. It's just like this, but it's different. And so what you have there is you have a massive culture shock, and we start at the very bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. And my dad, through diligence, hard work, and just being the smart guy that he is, both him and my mom worked their way up. And so I get to see this. This is what it looks like to be really poor and not to have anything towards being upper middle class by the time I'm 17, 18 years old. But within that entire time, I either inherited or it was explicitly said to me, if you want something in life, you go out and get it for yourself. So the two times in or three times in the year where I could expect something is my birthday, the Christmas, and in Lunar New Year. Other outside of that, it's like you're on your own. So within me was this desire to go and build something and to put myself to use. And I tried many different things, it didn't work. It wasn't until I found my love for design and that there was actually a profession for it that it actually started to coalesce. Because before I was just doing unskilled labor. And I remember thinking to myself, my very first job, the very first day, stocking bolts of fabric at a fabric warehouse, thinking to myself, this is a poor use of human capital. There's got to be more for myself and maybe for other people, but I was mostly thinking about myself. And so it's a long journey going to school and then starting my own business and then finding my business acumen, getting the training in the field, so to speak, that I start to become the person I am. Now, for a reference point, I don't make a YouTube video. I don't do social media until I'm 42 years old. So this is a 4 decade long journey to get here.
Wow, that's incredible. Um, so I want to take it back for a second too, because you said that you started your company. Did you? So obviously the company that I think everybody knows about and associates with you right away is the Future, right? I think that's the
Yes.
big one. Is that the first company you started?
No, it's
Okay.
probably the 3rd or 4th company, but I don't wanna talk about the other ones. The one I'll talk about right before, the one that lays the foundation for the future to be possible is called Blind, and we're a motion design firm. We make commercials and music videos for some of the biggest brands and bands in the world. We worked with Coldplay, Justin Timberlake, Charles Barkley, just to name a few, and the big companies like Xbox
Yep.
with Microsoft and Google. That's what we were doing. We're making commercials for these really big companies, and it's what allowed me to have the financial buffer so that I can create a second company without worrying about whether or not I can pay rent or put food on the table.
That's amazing. And so you started Blind before the Future company.
Yes.
When you what I'm just curious for my own why did you decide to push more publicity towards Future as opposed to Blind?
Great question. It's not for not trying, because when we're in the middle of doing commercial work, I would go on sales meetings, like to different states. I would go to New York. I'm based in LA. We would
Okay.
take out ads in directories and magazines. We had a public relations person looking for press for us, and we had hundreds of pieces of press. And then social media comes on the scene. I'm trying, but the disconnect here for me is the only thing we ever seem to talk about are our projects and what we hope to get from clients. So as you can imagine, it's really unengaging. It's advertorial at best and self-promotion most of the time. And it left a bad taste in my mouth, right? Like we would see relatively low engagement. Hey, we did this. We're proud of this work. We love these clients. And people will see right through it. You're looking for work, aren't you? You're trying to capture people's attention so you stay top of mind. It isn't until we start the future that I start writing in my own voice with my own opinions and beliefs. And I didn't have to worry about sabotaging the entire company. And the company before was with 20 plus people and I think three or four creative directors. I don't speak for them. I have a very strong point of view. And so that's another reason. This is why I think large companies, and large companies can be 20 people or 20,000 people. If you look at everything that they make, it's really boring, washed down content that's really banal. Why? Because legal gets through it. They filter through like everybody's opinions. We all agree. And so they wind up saying very safe things. And luckily for me, starting the future, it was literally just me and another person, an assistant. And I'm not going to ask the assistant what they feel because they're here to back me up, right? So you start making stuff and then it gets traction. The reason why I don't talk about blind so much is because I only bring it up if it's relevant.
That's so smart. And I feel like a lot of people can get a lot out of that message because for sure, if you came out with Blind and you were like, "Hey, here's this content, here's why we're so great, here's, all these cool projects we've done," it's like, okay, for sure. But people definitely view that as more of a self-promoting, as more of like chest beating, whatever you want to call it, right? Having a different outlet that you can share your personal views and not speak for the whole company, and then share things still that go in line with design and why like that is your expertise, but not have it connected necessarily right away to Blind. I think that's super smart. And that's another way that then you can build your own personal brand as well. And I feel like if I just showed like a lot of my friends or people in my circle, like just a quick screenshot of you, like your face just snapped, it'd be like, who is that? It'd be like, oh, it's the future. Like I know that guy. So it's an amazing like connection to that personal brand too.
Yeah, Seth Godin talks about this quite a bit. He says there's a big shift between mass media, niche media, paid advertising or paid traffic and organic traffic. And the attention right now is where the money is. And so you have to kind of think about what people care about. And he said most people just care about themselves. Don't send me email, send me me mail. What's in it for me? And I think about that a lot. Almost like to the degree in which people critique me now, where they say, "Chris, who are you? We just hear messages, and we see that you're trying to help, but we don't know who you are." So I have to kind of backtrack a little bit, and from time to time, sprinkle in a little bit of my personal story, so people think that it's not just a robot generating these things.
That's so interesting. And I've never heard the me mail, but I think that's brilliant. And I mean, for people listening, like a big thing that we switched around recently is like when we send out our agreements and stuff like that, we used to have our about us page first. That was the first page after the cover. And we were looking at that and we were like, this is not really serving the client any. Why don't we put our executive summary up front so they can literally just scroll, look at that, be like, okay, cool. And then we'll put us all the way at the bottom if they need to learn more. But like that concept of me mail, like what's in it for me? Alex Hermosi says the S and Me 500 instead of the S&P 500. Like there's so I really, really like that concept. Do you have any implementable takeaways on how we can get away from sending emails and focus more on like the emails? Is there any things that you've learned or any ways that you communicate in email that works better for you that you found?
Yeah, it starts with understanding who your customers are. Um, People would say in a 21st century business, a business exists to create a customer. I think that's Peter Drucker who said that. So how do you create a customer? You have to understand who your customers are. And our tendency is to go broad versus narrow because we think if we aim wider, we'll get more people. It seems logical on the surface, but in application and reality, it's the opposite. The narrower you go, the more you understand who they are, and you can build a pretty accurate avatar or an archetype of the person. And it needs to be this clear. Like when I do a workshop on this, I say, everybody imagine who your clients are right now. Just picture them in your mind. And then we're going to do an exercise and we're going to draw them. Like, yeah, even if you can't draw, I want you to draw them doing something they love or care about, an activity of some sort. So there's going to be an action. So if they're writing, I want you to draw them writing. Where are they sitting? In what environment? Who do they look like? Are they old or they young? And oftentimes they have no idea. It's the most generic stick figure kind of person. It's cardboard. And now when we say like, if we're going to write me mail to this person, we don't know who they are. How can we write me mail? And I think this is why people send out super generic and broad messages, right? So you have to get down to it. And I'll admit something right now. Prior to working with my friend Jose Caballé, I was guilty of some of this. Like I would design based on my worldview, my aesthetics, my preferences, my favorite typefaces. And Jose coming from a user experience and user interface world, from the digital world, the product design world, he does, you don't make products and apps and websites for no one, you make them for someone. And that customer centric approach bled over into my understanding of customer centric marketing. So he builds products, I build campaigns, and I build designs. And so now we need to understand who it's for. And as soon as you figure that part out, everything else becomes much easier. You get a sense of what their wants are and what their needs are. And they're a little bit different. And the golden question is, what keeps them up at night? Do you know what keeps them up at night? And if you know this, then you can start to write about that. And that's important.
It's so funny to me because that's the concept itself is so incredibly simple, right? Know who you're talking to, know what's keeping them up at night, know their biggest pain points. Like that is an extremely simple concept, but holy shit, I think is it easy to overlook sometimes. And like just hearing you say it, now I'm thinking back, I'm like, have I been talking to people in email? Like I'm trying to address our ideal client profile. Like, is that, and that's something that's definitely not easy to do, right? You need to be able to like identify and really sit down and like think about who that ideal person is and who you want to work with is. But then once you have that down and you're having a bunch of those conversations with people, you cannot, it's not as easy as copy paste, but you know the general, hey, this is what these people hold valuable. This is what their pain points are. And this is most of their goals. You know, obviously those things are going to fluctuate north or south a little bit, but they'll stay within some bracket. That's gold. I think that's so cool. I'm curious on this as well, Chris. So you started blind, then you went into the future for, you know, the reasons we've already talked about and running the two simultaneously. When did you learn slash fall in love with sales? Because I believe you are in love with sales. I can hear the passion when you speak about it. But was that in blind? Was that before? Was that another job? Like when did you actually find that passion?
I can remember. And I'm a reluctant salesperson who's learned that it's actually a really cool thing. Because, like most people, I think we have a really negative image in our mind, an emotional reaction to the word sales and salespeople. It's because we've been on the other end of really bad salespeople, and it gets uh, it's like we have so many examples of this that this is what it needs to be a salesperson. And we find like alpha types, super aggressive, talkative types, very gregarious, social people who seem to have a way with words, the gift of gab. And we're like, well, we're not like that. And if you look at a cross section of creative people, I would say the majority, vast majority, probably 90% of them self identify as introvert and probably socially awkward. It's why we work with visuals and computers and not with people. And so I told myself a story, and this is a dangerous story we tell ourselves. I'm not that. I'm not good at that. I don't want that. I don't desire it, and it's not important to me. So we hire people. We hire executive producers. We hire internal and external sales teams to do that work for us. And then about 5 years into my business, I meet my business mentor and coach. He's since passed away. His name is Kier McLaren. And he starts to teach me how to do sales in a way that I never understood before. So again, in the past, what I did was I came to the meeting with lots of assumptions. I did my homework, which is what I thought you do. You read the scripts, you study the history of the company, what you can find on the web, and you go armed with all this information, ready to kind of just throw it up right in front of them to impress them with how much you've learned. But in Kevin Daly's book, Socratic Selling, he says, don't make that mistake. It's because you only read the information that's available that they want publicly known. If you're really good at research, there's the stuff that just happened today and the stuff they never talk about. That's the opportunity for you to find out in a conversation. So back to Kier, he taught me how to ask the questions and that it was okay to ask. I know it sounds really weird, but as a creative person, I had all these preconceptions about how this conversation was supposed to go, and most of them were wrong. So he gave me permission to ask what's on my mind, to speak whatever it is that I'm feeling. I'll give you a really easy example. How many times have you been in a meeting before with a prospect and you know it's a competitive bid situation where you wanted to ask them, who else are they talking to?
Yeah,
Where
I
you
mean,
wanted
for
to ask
sure.
them, what is your budget? Or I'm just curious, how will you decide? And so we tell ourselves we can't ask this question because it seems unfair, it seems wrong, it's rude, it's too direct. And then Kira's like, just ask that question. And I'm like, just like that, Kira? And he's like, just like that, kid. So I go into the meeting, I ask the question, and to my surprise, first of all, it does throw people off. And then after they get over their initial shock that somebody wants to know how they make decisions, what inspired them, what motivated them to even call us in the first place, what they see in us as opposed to what they see in others, and even like their comfort range around budget, now you have an unfair competitive advantage, a legal one, an ethical one, because I asked. Every once in a while, you will get a client who says, I'm uncomfortable answering that question. And you say, okay, but I don't accept it. So I say, how come? Do you want us just to guess? Because we're not in the guessing business. I don't want to guess what budget you have. I don't want to guess what might solve your problems. I don't want to guess what might make the biggest impact on your business. So if you don't know, who would know? And can we explore this a little further? So after that, they're like, I guess that makes some sense. We'll play this game a little bit longer. And so what happens, what usually is scheduled for like a 30-minute discovery briefing call turns into an hour and a half. And I even warned them up front. I just want to let you know this might get a little uncomfortable because I'm going to ask you some really direct questions because I want to know what it is that you want. And maybe nobody's ever done this to you or with you before, but we will. And it'll be a little bit uncomfortable, but we'll get to the truth, I think. It's like, well, this is a breath of fresh air.
That is really awesome. And I love it because, yeah, I think a lot of salespeople, have this or they have this concern in their mind where it's like, I can't ask them about price. I can't ask them about, what are these other questions that are taboo or like not acceptable
Right.
to ask in the space. But I completely agree with you. In fact, I almost argue that it is in both your and their best interest that you do know these things because right away, if they say something that is not your expertise or is way north or south of your budget, it's like, hey, we actually might not be the right person to talk to for this. And I really want to respect your time. So, I can give you somebody else or I can introduce you a friend or something like that. But if they're within those brackets and like, oh, okay, cool. So that's actually a lot more helpful. And now we're getting closer to what we can actually do to solve your issues. But you never would have known unless you asked.
Yeah, like I'll give you the example. Like right now, we just moved into a new house, and it's a new house, but it's a mid-century house. It's new to us. It's not a new house, and there are problems with the house. And so when we hear weird sounds, we're like, I think it's this. And so we call someone up, like say we call like an HVAC guy, comes out to repair the air conditioning, and he's like, it's not this. But what if he went in and actually ripped things out and started changing ducks and sending us thousands of dollars worth of bills for stuff and didn't solve the problem? So what happens is, okay, there's a couple of things you need to know from a sales point of view. Something in someone's life has upset the natural order of things. It's referred to as a compelling event. It compels them to take action to relieve some pain or increase a gain. Or in storytelling, it's called an inciting incident. It's the call to adventure by the herald, right? Like everything's normal. You're working on the farm, and now the king or the emperor needs soldiers to fight in a war. You're like, ugh, all right. I was happy being a farmer, so I reluctantly joined this thing. So a compelling event has happened, and now the prospect desires change in their life. They may know possible solutions. They think they understand the problem. So they're coming to you pre-diagnosed, thinking it's a plumbing problem, it's electrical problem, it's a roofing problem, right? And they talk to you and say you're a roofer and it's electrical problem. You can't take for granted that the roof is the real problem. So you enter in a diagnostic process and you ask them questions, tying it to our first part of this conversation. You ask them questions. So then they're like, oh, it's not the roof at all. You're right. It's actually this whole other thing. Then you, being an honest and ethical person, if you're like a roofing specialist, you say, "Look, I have some buddies that do electrical work. They're great. They work in the area. Would you like a number?" So you refer someone, and then what happens in the mind of this person, the prospect is, "Wow, that roofer was really cool. He or she could have easily taken my money, repaired something that didn't need repairing, and upsold me stuff, but they really had my best interest at heart. They were here to serve." So sales isn't like what we think it is. Sales is to be of service to someone, to hold their needs above yours and to be a great listener and to help them. So you can think of sales as helping and serving. And those two words, very few people have a bad reaction to. And so I think what I'd like to do, it's not a personal crusade, but I'd like to help as many people as possible have an entirely different relationship with the word sales as I have. My former coach did this for me, and it's a gift that has lasted and will last for the rest of my life. And it will expand as I share it with more people. So, what did I learn in the whole process? So, in a very short amount of time, I started to look forward to the call, the new business call. Before I was like, oh, I was dreading it, right? Like it's like a dog and pony show. They want me to jump through hoops and spin around, and it's a bathing suit contest. It's like, I'm not interested in this. So no wonder I didn't like it. And now I've learned to love it and to get really good at it. And in that first year in which he helped me, we were doing about $2.2 million a year. And then we went that year that I started implementing this training, we went to $3.9 million. And I tell people, being of service, helping people actually also helps you. Chasing people, trying to manipulate them doesn't help them and also does not help you long term. So I become transformed in the process. And he tells me this idea, which I didn't accept before, but now I embrace, which is this: no one can sell you like you because you have the experience. You're passionate. You can pull in the references and you can hear something that would be nothing to someone else, but could be like the key insight. And with your
Yeah.
creative brain, with your business acumen, now you're armed with these questions that you can come in and be able to get some insight. That's a powerful combination. And so that's
Um,
where I find my power.
that's so cool. And you said something within that that I'm curious on as well, because I know for us and for a lot of people, follow-up is like a huge, huge, huge part of sales, right? Like there's so many deals that get done in follow-up. And you said something interesting in there, which was not chasing. You're not chasing, you're not forcing. When I don't always think that follow-up is, hey, did you forget about me? Like, well, just kind of bumpy because what's your view on follow-up? How do you organize it? Do you do something different or like what's your system look like?
When I do a sales, it typically is depending on the industry. So if I'm working in the commercial industry, which I have 20 years of experience doing, a decision is being made really soon. So there isn't a lot of follow up to be had because a deadline has been set. Media has been purchased, and so they have to move forward. And they realize taking longer hurts everybody. And so if we do initial call, which happens, sometimes there's lingering concerns and fears. Is this the right team? Do you have the right horsepower to do this work? Do you have this specific expertise? And so when the job isn't going to be awarded and we start to feel it slipping through our hands, we schedule another call, right? My executive producer who does the heavy lifting, but then brings me in at the right moment. My conversation with him is, when you feel the sales is going away, you need to let me know and I will get on the phone. And then now you get into objection handling. So initially, we understand what you want. We seem to agree conceptually, like you want a new pool, but there's something that's preventing you from hiring us as contractors, right? And so what is it? Like what's keeping you back? What's causing you pause right now? What are you afraid of happening? And they'll just tell you. If you ask in a genuine and open way and you don't ask in a defensive way, they'll tell you. And they'll say, Chris, we're concerned that you just don't have enough artists on staff, or you don't have enough render nodes or some complicated terminology that they'll use. And then you have to address all those things. And this is where I learned how to do objection handling. So first I learned sales from Kier, and then I'm listening now for all their problems. And I try my best to address them. And sometimes you have to use, there's two things that I tell people when it's at the end and you think you're going to lose it, you step in with a guarantee and you affirm to them this is going to be okay. And the way you do that is something like this. And it's a trick I learned from other directors. It's like, look, I hear that you don't think this approach will work. I'm doing this against my best interest because actually it's going to cost us more money to do this. So I'm going to give you a guarantee. If you don't like the way things work at my own expense, I'll pay it out of my own pocket to do the way you think it's going to work. And here's my phone number, day or night. Give me a call if you're ever concerned in this entire process. I will answer it. My personal phone number. And with that, usually it's never failed. I've only used it a handful of times. They book the job, the money's in the account. So that is when you're selling something when there's a fast approaching deadline. Okay. Now, to answer your question, where it's more likely going to be the case in which people are listening to this conversation, which is a long sales cycle. They don't know the urgency of their own problem. And so they can wait. And because there's no urgency behind the problem, they'll kind of sit there and overthink it and they won't be sure. And so in a situation like that, if you've done everything properly, this wouldn't happen. But let's just say you're here in the situation. What I would do is just set some reminders in my calendar to just notify me. So like in a week, in 4 weeks, in 2 months, in 8 months, and that's about it. So I automatically just start to schedule them. Call Mary, call Bobby, and or email them. So the first one is like, just want to follow up if there are any lingering questions or concerns that you have, or maybe this isn't a priority anymore, but with your permission, I'd like to check in about 4 weeks or so. And they just do that. And I remember in one specific case, the last email that I sent out about 8 or 9 months out from the initial discovery call was, look, I feel like I'm bugging you and I don't want to do that. And so unless you state otherwise, I'm not going to send you any more reminders or prompt you anymore. And the weird thing is this, Grant, on that last email, within hours, they email me back. We've been thinking about this. We're so ready. Let's do it. And that turns into a client. So that was almost a year long follow up. But I try to do it in a way that's not evasive, that doesn't use any high pressure tactics, because they might work in the short term, but they don't leave a good feeling in someone's mind.
That is a really, really, really good point you just made there. First of all, that was all amazing. But that point you made right at the end is yes, if you use high pressure tactics, if you use these more manipulative tactics, sure, you may be able to close a deal, right? But that one deal is after they give you the money, they go through the program, they're like, yeah, maybe we're even happy with this. Like maybe this even worked great, but oh my, I don't want to talk to Grant again. Like the last time I talked to Grant, it was uncomfortable. It didn't even like maybe I'm even looking at someone else just because I don't want that experience I had. And you know how human psychology works. Like people always remember the negative way stronger than the positive. So I think that the way you do it is definitely set up more for longevity. And it's that long-term relationship of the client. And I think that's the way that everybody should work with that. And something else that you said within that last response was you implement a guarantee just to say, hey, look, This is something that I'm so confident in, offering you guys against myself, not against you, but kind of me putting my chips on the table. X guarantee. Does that sound? And I think when people hear that, hey, there is a guarantee attached to this, and this is something that we are extremely confident we can deliver, or then whatever the guarantee is, we've found that that's helped us a ton too, just because it shows that you're not going to be like, oh, it didn't work. Peace out. Like, sorry. Um, I love that. And I also love to just making sure that there is, if there's any urgency, just make sure that that is understood between both parties, right? Like if they're like, yeah, Grant, we know we need to do this, but we don't really know when, or we don't know when we're going to have budget, or, that's something big on. Like, if you guys said, you're going to need to do this, when, what's justifying that? Like, why do you need to do this? And there's just stuff where you can come to a mutual agreement and say, hey, look, by this date, I don't wanna bug you guys. I don't wanna bother you. I don't wanna follow up with you for months. Um, let's whether it's a yes, no, or a maybe, that's fine. I just wanna know then, hopefully it's not a maybe, right? But yes or no, I should say. Um, but that's amazing. And I think the last one of the last things I wanna ask you, Chris, is it's interesting to me because I have a lot of friends that have really, really strong personal brands. And it's like you said earlier in this call, not something that happens overnight. You have an extremely strong personal brand. Two-part question. How important is personal branding to you? And then the second part of that question is if you had to start all over with a personal brand today, in today's, TikTok, shorts, vertical video content era, how would you go about doing that? What would the first step be? What advice do you have to people who are looking to start a personal brand today?
All right, I'd love to answer a question. I'm going to adjust my lighting again.
Yeah, all good.
Okay, it looks like it's going to be overcast, and then I need to get some shades put in here. Before I
No
answer your
worries.
question
Mhm.
on personal branding, I want to follow up on something that you had said earlier. I think when you're young, you think like, I'm going to do everything I can to get this job. And then when you start to realize that's not good enough, I just, I want to do everything I can to get this client. So you think a little bit bigger now. And then when you get a little bit older, you're like, I want to get this account. I want everything that this account does, and I want to be an agency of record. And it's a transition. It's a you maturing as a business person, a marketer. And oftentimes, unfortunately, a lot of these sales tactics are really just for the job. So the kind of thing that I'm thinking about is you could lose the sale today, but you can gain the account tomorrow. And that's what I want. And so oftentimes when a client comes to me and says, Chris, we need a video from you, self-diagnosed, self-prescribed. I say, well, this is awesome. This is very flattering that you want this from me. And then I just do a hard pivot. I say, but before we go and assume this is the right thing to do, that's going to impact your business, do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions? And so we acknowledge them, we do the pivot, and then we start talking about their business. And then we compare what it is that they want with the actions they want to take prior to talking to us. And in that moment, I think light bulbs start firing off. And when I was in the client service space, which I'm no longer doing, the reaction that I would get from people when I started to implement this was night and day difference. Very rarely do you have a meeting with a prospect that you don't know, and by the end of it, they're hugging you and saying, "You gave me a tremendous amount of clarity on my business, and I've done things like this before. What we were able to do in 30 minutes, you've done more than someone else has done in 3 weeks." And that to me is like sales. Now you understand. And so now the client is open for all kinds of services from you if you should feel like you want to move forward. And so that's a critical thing. So stop thinking about the job or even the client and think about the account. You have to act differently. So we think about the now, we're not thinking about the long term. And so this is where I want to shift the thinking. Did you want to say something?
Yes. Yes, I did. I've never heard anyone put it like that, but that is such a unique but true way to look at it. Most people, especially like young agency owners in the agency space, a lot of people look at it as, hey, I want to get this job. I want to get paid for this one service. And then, I'm not even thinking about the future. And then, like you said, you get a little bit older and it's like, okay, or more mature, should I say? And it's like, okay, I want this clients, right? I want to do a few jobs for this person. And then at the end, it's like, I want this whole account. Like I know that if we provide for really well in these few services we do, they're never going to want to leave us because why would they? We're doing the best service and we're actually communicating and understanding what they're saying. That right there is golden. If you guys are listening, write that down. I'm going to do a recap at the end of some of the biggest takeaways I have, but I'm going to spoil it right now. That's probably the biggest one that I've never heard somebody talk about online before. So that's golden, Chris.
Thank you so much. Okay, let's get into the personal branding stuff.
Yep.
Okay, what is that here? How important is personal branding?
How
So
important? Yeah. And then the second part was just how do you
how do you build it?
how yeah, how would you tell somebody to build it today, basically?
Okay, so we have to get into some definitions and terms. And so a lot of times when people say branding, what they really mean is identity system, like what things look like on an aesthetic level. Like, oh, we just redesigned your brand. Here's your logo and here's some typefaces and colors. It's an important part of it, but it's not the brand. And so we're gonna get into what branding means. Martin Neumeyer defines it as a person's gut feeling about a person's service or organization. Jeff Bezos says it's what people say about you when you're not in the room. It's something about your reputation. So it's an impression that you create on people, and it's through many different touch points. It's the tone of your voice, the words that you use, the character of the person, how you dress, how you look, whether or not the lighting matters to you or not, right? Those little things signal to the other person, this person cares about X, Y, and Z. The car you drive, the clothes you wear, everything, it creates an impression. So branding is in essence, according to my friend Christine Lucer, is impression management. You can't control it, but you can influence it. So then what we do is we say to ourselves, like, if it's about reputation and building relationships with people, what do we do in our everyday life, like with our parents, with our friends, with our neighbors, with our students, with our boss, that creates an impression on them? If you show up early, you're an eager beaver. You're punctual and you're prompt. If you show up late, you're a little lackadaisical and maybe you're just a little more carefree. I'm not saying one is great or not. Just be aware of it and be much more intentional in how you move in this world. When we take it online, it gets amplified. Every little thing you do is now amplified times 10, 100, or 1,000. And so we usually need to work with someone to give us feedback because it's very hard to see yourself. The expression of you can't read the label inside the jar. You are your jar and you're inside trying to like, who am I? What am I transmitting to other people? And so we can sit down, we can write down some things and think about this. Okay. Now, when it comes to an online presence, the first thing that they're going to know about you is your name. So choose your name carefully. So if it's a business or a fictitious name, think about that. It needs to sound good. It needs to be memorable. It needs to be easy to say. And if it's a multicultural, multi-language thing, then you need to consider how it sounds and what it means in different languages. The second thing that people are going to notice is just as simple as your profile picture. It says something about you because we as creatures of storytelling and consuming different stories about people, we make a lot of assumptions without knowing anything. Like, are you wearing a G-Shock watch?
It's a Garmin.
Garmin, okay.
Yeah.
So that tells me something about you too, right? At least Garmin's of the past were tied to maybe your activity. Maybe there's a GPS built into it. There's something sporty about you in that, and that you're probably a little bit more rugged than someone who's wearing like an expensive like jewelry kind of watch, right? And you can see just from one thing, I can tell something about you. And I see that you chose a black watch versus like a bright green one. So you're like utility. It needs to function. I don't need the flaming orange one because I'm not really trying to call attention to this. Okay. Now I'll pause here, Grant. You tell me how on or off I am.
You nailed it right on the head, Chris. That's yeah, really, really, really
So
on.
I only picked up on one thing. And if we
Yeah.
were sitting here longer, I could pick apart every single thing because I observe things and people for a living, right? Okay. So let's get back into it. I want to be able to create a brand so iconic, so identifiable as a personal brand that if you just see one small fragment, you hear one phrase that you'll know it's me. This is critical. So, at least here in the United States, if there was a red trucker cap, you would automatically assume it's who?
Yeah, Donald Trump. Yeah.
Donald Trump. You just
Yeah.
know it. And like, you just see a sliver of that or that strange hairdo he has, and
Yep.
that becomes an icon. And he's very good at understanding personal brand. You remember Drew Carey, a
Yeah.
comedian? You know, when he got surgery for his eyes, he first appeared without his glasses and people freaked out. And so now he wears non-prescriptive thick black frames because it becomes part of his character. And so I want you to think about that. So we make conscious decisions about the color, the shape, the size of the things we wear. So for me, I need to wear glasses. I'm nearsighted. And my glasses are a way for people to understand who I am. When I take it off, people are like, put your glasses back on, just like Drew Carey. Right. So I'm looking for designer frames that make a little statement that I care about fashion and design. That's number one. Number two, I don't have any hair. I'm bald. So I wear a cap mostly because I have a shiny head and it just looks like a chrome ball up here. And so I wear a cap. And so when people see a certain cap of a design, they're like, oh, that is Chris. So this is important for you. And I like to wear like a little kind of crazy fun design sneakers with a suit. And so I'm making all these intentional decisions such that, and this is pretty wild. And you could do this too, Grant. Sometimes I'm running like in the cold, face covered, like heavy jacket, and all they can see is a cap and about this much of my face. And literally, I'm like running across the street, and somebody's like, "Hey, I'll watch you on YouTube." I'm like, "Cool, thanks, bro." Right? That's communicating like a visual to tie with an idea. So let's talk about the idea. I try and get people to use two words to describe their brand, two juxtaposing words, two words that don't belong together, but when combined together, make it for an awesome, powerful combination. This is like semiotics at play. The sum of the whole is greater than the parts. And so you think Apple many years ago used to run this campaign and they would describe their products as insanely great. And you would think insane is not a word you ever want to describe yourself in, but insanely great. Like, what does that really mean? Right? Insane in their pursuit of perfection, their obsession with detail, like how they design the packaging. So when you open it up, it's like you're unwrapping a gift and there are no fussy points now. Like you just pull one thing and the whole shrink wrap, one of the most frustrating things, completely comes apart. They even design the innards where most people never see. But if you were to take apart your Mac, it's like that's how insane and obsessive they are. So insane, great. Great's a boring word. Everybody calls himself great. But insane by itself, they send you to the loony hospital, but you put the two together, it makes for a very powerful combination. So my two-word brand is loud introvert. I am an introvert, but I've learned how to leverage social media and content creation to have a greater presence in the world so I can play with the extroverts and I can teach people how to do that. And so somebody's like, Chris, you're like the business Buddha. That's a good combination. It's alliteration. You're
I
a
like
charming
that.
razor blade. Look at that. Charming razor blade. I'm like, that describes me. My wife's like, that person nailed you, baby. I'm like, I guess they did. And so look for your two-word combination. Don't use two words that overlap in meaning. Creative designer. Yeah. Like a designer is creative. Like that's so boring to me. And so what I find is if we lean into a neutral to negative attribute about ourselves, but it's very true to neutral to positive attribute ourselves, we find the overlap. Fewer people can claim that. I was talking to Joey Cofone. He's got a new book called The Laws of Creativity. He says if you take anything that defines you, any of your activities and interests and hobbies, for anything that you're into, there's about 10,000 variables. Three variables in, you're at a combination of 1 in 1 billion. Four variables in, you're 1 in 1 trillion, which makes you truly unique, right? So I'm into comic books, Marvel, not DC. I'm into mixed martial arts and skateboarding, and the list goes on and on. All those little weird, peculiar things about me make it impossible for someone else to be me.
That is so cool. And hearing it put like that is not something I've heard before. And I couldn't agree more that having that neutral to negative or neutral to positive thing within your brand that makes you uniquely you, I think that's genius. And it shows a ton of self-awareness. Like, if you just went up to somebody, you were like, "Hey, I like to help people, and that's all I do." Like, immediately people are like, okay, I don't know about that." But if you said what was the razor blade one you said?
Charming razor blade.
Yeah, if you said the charming razor blade, like, that is so in I it makes you think like, what does that mean? Like,
Right.
why is Chris a charming razor blade? That's super cool. And then you realize it's like, oh, okay, because he's obviously extremely charismatic, but more importantly, he understands people. And when he needs to be, he can make things happen for the better of everybody. And I love that. And I do really, really appreciate everything today, Chris. I want to wrap up. I want to respect your time. So before we go, I'm going to give my biggest deliverables or excuse me, my biggest implementable takeaways that I've learned from you. And I usually try to keep them at three, but I didn't. There's a few on here. Um, and I'll just summarize these real quick, guys. Memail, not email. Make sure you're knowing who you're communicating to. You're knowing what they want. You're knowing their biggest pain points and their biggest things that keep them up at night. Tailor that to that person. Less about you, more about the person. Hence, Memail. What's in it for me? Um, Sales is helping and serving. It is not manipulative. It's not forcing somebody to do something. It's not creating a need where there isn't any. It is helping and serving. The three different stages of an agency, a business, a firm, whoever you are, when you start and you're very immature, you're going to want the job. When you get a little bit more mature, you're going to want the client. And when you get even more mature and you see the bigger picture of everything, you're going to want the account. So never focus on the job, focus on that bigger, not just the immediate sale, but how can we work with this company forever? Um, Last thing that I will add here, or second to last, read people. Read people. If you look at me and you see my watch and you see that it's rugged, it's utilitarian, it's probably active, you can tell a ton about me. Looking at Chris, you see that he has the designer glasses, you see he has the hat, you see that he's probably a little bit more creative and flashy in some aspects, and he likes to outwardly put that. Um, you can tell a lot about people, but then more importantly, you can use that in how you're talking to them, how you're helping them solve problems. You can use that in all these things to just make it a much more genuine, but more importantly, a much more received conversation. And then lastly, one of my one of the best things, one of the best ways I've ever heard somebody put personal branding is you are in a jar and everybody else can see what's on the label of that jar except you. And that is an awesome way to view personal branding is what am I putting out? What are people seeing when they look at me? And so think about that when you're building, guys. Chris, this was an amazing podcast. I seriously had a blast. Where can we learn more about you? Where can we find you? How can we get in touch?
I try and make it super easy to find me. I'm on most social platforms, and on every new one that pops up, but I'm at the Chris Doe. Doe is spelled D-O. And you can find me on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, everywhere else. If you're more interested in the future as a company and you need help with your creative business and you want to level up, it's the future, and the future is spelled without an E. So it's Futur, thefuture.com. Thanks, Grant.
Amazing. And if you guys aren't convinced by now, after listening to this whole podcast, to go check him out, go check Chris out now, immediately after this. Thanks for everything, Chris.
My pleasure.